إن الحمد لله نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Welcome to Quran Page a Day. Today inshallah we will be collecting gems from Surat Al-Qāri'ah, which is surah number 101 in the Noble Quran. Surat Al-Qāri'ah is a Makki surah. The word Al-Qari'ah means the striking calamity. This surah has 11 verses and this was revealed between the period 613 to 615 AD. The revelation background of this surah is that this surah was revealed in the early days of the prophethood of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This was the time when people of Mecca they did not believe in resurrection. They did not believe in judgment. They did not believe that there was any accountability after they died. So it was very befitting for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be telling them some things about what is actually going to happen on the day of judgment. What does it mean to be held accountable after one dies? So this surah was revealed to give some details around the day of judgment. So the theme of the surah is description of the day of judgment. Now let's find out what is in Surat Al-Qāri'ah. There are 6 things to remember in Surat Al-Qāri'ah. Now when a conversation needs to be started, there is multiple ways of doing that. One of the ways of starting a conversation is by making a claim at the very beginning of the conversation to capture the attention of the listener. For example, if somebody comes to us and says, the accident, the big accident, did you know what happened in that big accident? Our attention would be captured immediately and we would be ready and focused to listen to what the person has to say next. Similarly, in this surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts the surah by saying the words Al-Qari'ah, the striking calamity. And then in the next couple of verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is stressing and focusing on that. Mal Qari'ah, what is the striking calamity? وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْقَارِعَةُ, and what will make you know what is the striking calamity? Now the words in here, the striking calamity, the word striking here means to hit things against each other so hard that they make a terrible, frightening noise. And calamity is a terrible and scary event that happens. For example, like when an earthquake comes and a city is completely destroyed. The Arab reader was familiar with the word Al-Qari'ah, but they never truly realized the severity of it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us it is an event where there would be very loud noises, there would be a lot of confusion and very scary things that will be happening by just saying the word Al-Qari'ah. Now in verse number 4, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that it will be a day, Yawma. That's the very first word in verse number 4, Yawma. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that will be the day when mankind will be like moths. Now, have you ever seen moths at night time near your porch light? What do the moths do? They fly around the light in circles, looking like they do not know where to go. They may even fly into the light, burning themselves or knocking into each other. They are in such a rush. All their flying around is useless. They never really get anywhere. The same will be true for the people on the day Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us about. Man's final return to his Lord will be in groups, much like swarms of moths. People will be confused and reluctant to return. However, they will be brought to their final accounting. Imagine when all the humanity will be brought in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This would be from the day of Adam alayhi salam till the final day of the world. How many billions and billions and billions of people would be brought in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the same time. And there would be such a big crowd and so much confusion on that day that it is unimaginable. In the next verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then tells us that mountains on that day would be like wool, that mountains will be destroyed. Now the lofty mountains, as we see them now, they are solid, enormous structures. If you start digging at a mountain, it's very hard to dig. Big machines are used, and that still take weeks and months sometimes to dig just one mountain. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that when the calamity and the tremor begins, these rock solid structures will melt away as if they were soft, fluffy wool. Now, wool is the fluffy white hair of sheep. When the wool has grown thick and heavy, the shepherds, they shear the wool off. And the sheared wool is very fluffy and light, and it blows very easily in the wind. And now imagine these mountains, these big structures. The mountains will be so weak like a wool, not as strong as they were. The mountains will be pulled apart like wool, and they will not be able to hold together. The mountains will become dust, and they will blow in the wind very easily, and so light they would be. And the mountains will be worn out and will become faded. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us this picture, this scene that is being established in front of us of what is going to happen on that day. Then in verse number 6, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is then telling us what happens that day. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that scales, the person whose scales will be heavy, they will have a great life, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that فَأَمَّا مَنْ ثَقُلَتْ مَوَازِينُهُ فَهُوَ فِي عِيشَةٍ رَاضِيَةٍ, that those people will go to Jannah and they will be very happy over there. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then tells us in verses 8 and 9 that when scales will be light, for whoever the scales will be light, they will be in a bottomless pit, which is filled with intense fire. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is establishing it is that someone who does not spend their life in doing good deeds, and they do not do those righteous deeds which will make their scales heavy, those people on that day will realize that they have wasted their life. And these are the people who may only come in with just very, very, very few good deeds, and even those deeds may be taken away by some of the bad things that they would have done with other people. And the good deeds of these people would be given to the other people as a recompense for the bad things that they would have done to others in the world. So we need to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to save us from falling in such a bottomless pit. Time for a self-check. Some of the questions we need to be asking ourselves when we read these verses with understanding. Do I believe that there is life after we die? Do I ask Allah to help me do more righteous deeds every day? Do I, before I sleep every day, hold myself accountable for all the deeds done that day? Do I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help me stay away from bad deeds and make a conscious effort to do so? Do I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect me from the fire? May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us to fulfill the rights of the Quran. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.